Okay, last lecture. We have covered a few hours at least of different topics, and activism gets shared and saved for the very end because what are we going to do with all this information? And but before you go, but I'm not an activist. We're going to talk about that. Don't you worry. But what I want to do together is first talk about like some. I want you to decide some kind of vague in some cases statements if they are true or false. So we're going to play like a little game of sorts. So true or false, right? First statement. Is this true or is this false? The people shall rule, right? If you said true, why? If you said false, why? Who are these people that we're talking about? Do they rule? Does that change? Does the statement change if it says the people do rule? And if you say that they don't, then who does? Today's going to be like many of the other days, right? Where I just kind of go, well, what about this? Well, what about that? Well, what about this? This is very much one of those situations. What this actually comes from, the people shall rule, is a community organizing principle. The idea is if you've been trained as a community organizer, you don't just walk into the community that you're going to serve and be like, we should do this and we should do this. And, you're in charge of like, no, no, no. You should let the people you are serving set the agenda. The people shall rule. But it can be used to really kind of think through like who does rule in our society and should they? I don't know. Okay, here's the next one. If you're not fighting for what you want, you do not want it enough. Is that true or is that false? Think about what does fighting even mean, right? Fighting means yelling, yeah, right? Does it mean like punching somebody in the nose? I don't know. So you kind of decide what fighting is. So if you're not volunteering for what you want, you do not want it enough. If you're not donating for what you want, you do not want it enough. If you're not working towards what you want, you do not want it enough. Like inherent in this particular statement is maybe an issue of privilege, because if you're not fighting for what you need, you do not want it enough. I mean, like some people don't necessarily have the opportunity to fight. They don't have the resources to fight, but other people do. So if you're not fighting for what others need, you do not want it enough. I'll say that again. If you're not fighting for what others need, you do not want it enough. So this idea of, oh my gosh, I care so deeply about these issues. If you're not fighting for what others need, maybe you don't need this. Again, just something to kind of think about. What gets people motivated? Because that's how social change, that's activism. Activism is motivation. What gets people to get involved? If you're not fighting for it, like what would get you to fight? What would get you to fight for maybe not what you want or you need, but what others need? What would make you want it enough? Speaking of motivation, next, true or false? Nobody's going to come to the meeting unless they have a reason to come to the meeting. When I pose this question to students, usually it's a resounding true. Nobody's going to come to the meeting unless they ever have a reason to come to the meeting. And then sometimes students are like, no, that's false. And I'm like, really? Tell me about all the meetings that you go to that you have no reason to go to. They're like, oh, okay, yeah. So my question then becomes, because like I said, all the questions. Well, wait, if nobody's going to come to the meeting unless they have a reason, how do you give them a reason? Every single time I've asked this, students immediately, without hesitation, without a breath, go, food. I'm like, okay, what kind of food? Pizza. Like it's always happened that way. Occasionally, like one person will be like donuts, and then everybody else has said pizza over them. Do you want the pizza people? Like, let's say you got together and pooled $35 to go buy, hopefully, 7 $5 pizzas. Do they even exist anymore? Probably not. You've pulled together $35 to go buy 2 pizzas. The world that we're living in. Do you want the pizza people? Do you want the people who just showed up to get the pizza? I don't know. Do you? You might. Because what if one of the people that walked in is like your next greatest like advocate and volunteer and knows all these resources and is super passionate? Because here's the thing about the pizza people. The pizza people will be polite, right? So they're going to come in, and if you're really, really good about like making sure you get to all the pizza people and say, hi, it's so nice to meet you. Thank you so much for coming today. Really, really hope you enjoyed the pizza. Here, just enjoy. Let me take just a minute of your time to let you know what the meeting's about today. Because the pizza person might be like trying to eye the door to get out of there. But what if you say something in that minute that they're like, wait, what? And they sit down in that seat and they totally become involved. Do you want the pizza people? And what in holy heck do you say to them? Like what did the whole idea of like an elevator pitch, if you were in an elevator and you were a captive audience, like you had a CEO of a company or something, your boss, whatever it is. Like that idea of an elevator pitch, what do you say in a short period of time to get somebody to really, really listen? What do you say? Like, how do you get people involved? How do you get them motivated? Do you want the pizza people? Have you been a pizza person? That you've gone, I'm not, there's no judgment in this entire lecture or course. But what gets people motivated? Okay, one last true or false. The bulldozers are coming, and you'll be out on the street tomorrow. Like all the exclamation points, right? We're yelling, the bulldozers is far better than, would you like to be a part of the community planning process? Is this true or is this false? Here, please stand by for me once again. Like, but what about this? What about that? What if the bulldozers never come? Like, the bulldozers are coming. And then the next day comes and goes. There's no bulldozers. First of all, wait a second. We've been talking about motivation. What's the motivating factor here? What is that statement? That bulldozers are coming. They're coming to tear down your house, right? What do you feel? What is the emotion that you feel? I mean, my goodness gracious. I would be terrified, right? Fear. Is fear a good? And I'm like saying good, like cringing my face again, like putting it in quotations. Like, is it a good motivator? Is it effective? I think it might be arguably, I don't know. Is it the most effective motivator? That if you're afraid of something, you're pretty highly motivated? Now, good in a kind-hearted, moralistic standpoint, I don't know. But let's go back to let's imagine that the bulldozers never came. You lied, or whoever came to your door screaming it. They lied. They're liars. I don't know. Like, do they lose credibility? Maybe 10 years ago, I would have said, yeah, nobody would ever believe them again. I don't know. I feel as if we do utilize fear in various areas as a motivating factor, and there isn't as much maybe honesty in this world. And people get away with it to a certain extent, it seems. That their credibility doesn't seem to get damaged. I don't know why that is. What motivates people? People in a lot of situations in our society are very highly motivated to create change or to be passionate about what they are passionate for. And they, are fighting for what they want. Maybe they're not fighting for what others need, but they're fighting for what they want. What's true? What's false? Lots to think about. Okay, let's talk about becoming an activist. You got to decide what makes you mad. Like what gets your blood boiling. You've got to learn extensively about the issue. You've got to find other people. You got to find your pizza people maybe and make a plan together and find more pizza people, like ask for help. You need to talk about it constantly and spread the word and let people know. And then the thing is, you learn about the issue, but the issue is going to probably be changing, possibly rapidly, no matter what, probably. And so you need to make sure that you stay up on the education. You need to celebrate small victories because a lot of times it is a long, long haul. It can be generational. It can be the rest of your life. Seneca Falls, remember where the first women's movement started? There was one person present at Seneca Falls that was alive when white women, achieved the right to vote. A lifetime. It took a lifetime. So to make sure to celebrate small victories and then don't give up because, again, it can take a long time, but it does happen. So for those of you, much like myself, you're like, but I don't feel like an activist. I am not an I. I have been in crisis since I took all my women and gender studies classes, because one of the classes we had to take over at Cal State Fullerton was a 6-unit course where you had to do a internship in an activism, that had an element of activism in it. And then you had to spend the other 3 units together as a class. It was an awesome class, but you had to develop protests to do around the campus. And so I quickly learned. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I don't want the bullhorn, which is funny because hello, how much have you heard me talk in these lectures? Clearly, I don't have a problem like talking to a lot of people and talking a lot. I just was so intimidated by these protests. And so what I did was I would immediately like find the task that I could like throw my hand up, like I'll bring all the scissors and glue sticks, or I'll paint the boxes, or I'll buy the boxes, like that kind of thing. We pulled together some money to have like a budget for our protests and things, but I didn't want to be out there like I'd quietly be a person passing out the flyers that we were all together, right, doing this all together. But I didn't want the bullhorn. So sometimes I think people feel that way too. And so let's talk about what you can do, what everybody can do. You can learn, and by learning, you can do a lot of listening and reading. I would really, really, if I could hope for everybody, like that just passion of voracious learning. I have a passion of voracious learning for this topic. Like every time I learn more, I just want to learn more. Writing. College really creates trained writers. You are a trained writer. And so you can use those abilities to really, really make a difference. Things that you know about, volunteering and donating and having tough conversations, especially with people in your life when you hear that they're saying things that are maybe a little bit worrisome or problematic. Maybe they're saying something in relation to like a privileged identity that they have, that they really are not thinking of the fact that they have privilege in that identity. I think that this is one of the most beautiful things that can come out of studying women's studies is you think about what somebody else is going through, empathizing and having an understanding for all of our unique experiences. And then voting. So an opportunity, a privilege again, that not necessarily is extended to everyone, but is definitely an opportunity to make your voices heard, which is cliche, but is true. Now, I don't know necessarily, I am not a political science person. I cannot like tell you with any amount of knowledge about like the electoral college, and I cannot. So like people who kind of get jaded and are like, my vote doesn't count. Okay, yeah, I can't speak to that. I can't tell you if it does or doesn't. Local elections, school boards, city councils, things like that, your vote really, really, really counts. I have learned that over the years, actually based upon some volunteering work in the school district that I live in. So we have had bond measures, and one lost. And it was gonna be like the first bond measure to do major improvements and updating to high schools. It lost by, I believe, 164 votes. That means if we had just been able to get to a handful, like single-digit handful of parents at every single school in the district to vote for the school bond measure, it would have passed. Like your vote really does matter on a local level. So it's not something I've always known, but now thankfully I've gotten the opportunity to see that like firsthand. So as we have made our way through all of these topics, the last one I want to share with you is the butterfly effect. And I'm guessing you've heard of this in some capacity. I'm about to do a really bad job of explaining it. If you know more, then don't judge me. There was a person named, I believe, Edward Lorenz. It'd be really cool if I would, I don't know, have notes in front of me when I do these lectures. But I have the notes written. They're in the other room, sitting in a file cabinet. Super helpful. I believe his name was Edward Lorenz. And I believe he was a mathematician and a meteorologist, studied math and the weather, and sent a big old formula through a big old computer, because this was in the 1950s-ish, and made this minute little change at the very end of a number with a decimal and tons of numbers. Made this minute little change, left it up to the computer to figure out this mathematical equation, came back and saw that tiny change really actually made a pretty big impact in the overall mathematical equation. So he used symbolically the idea of weather. Think about the last time, especially this time of year, like the last time you saw a butterfly fluttering its wings. The idea that Edward Lorenz put forth is the fact that that little amount of energy being created in the universe can build and build and build in momentum to create a major weather event, like a hurricane or a tornado. So this idea that this butterfly effect, that this tiny little aspect of energy and effort can make a much larger aspect. It's really a beautiful thing to think about in relation to social change, especially when issues are overwhelming. That everybody fluttering their proverbial, like their symbolic opportunities to make a difference in the world around them. Now, here's the thing, that can work in the opposite way too. If everybody's doing mean, thoughtless, selfish things like that, all that, so technically it could go the other way. So thinking about what you can do, especially when things get overwhelming, what can you do? I leave you with this. The moment we choose to love, we begin to move against domination and against oppression. The moment we choose to love, we begin to move towards freedom, to act in ways that liberate ourselves and others. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your willingness and especially your remarkable efforts to make your way through what I really, really hope is a topic that you found your heart and your soul in and your life in, and what it is you want out of our lives and our society going forward.